Hello there. The programme you're about to watch will contain discussions of some subjects which some viewers may find uncomfortable. But more importantly, the robots who monitor every single word I say for things that the Coca-Cola company wouldn't like their brand advertised against will find disturbing. This common problem here on the World Wide Web has led to the invention of a new language, algo-speak. Words like unalive instead of the word that the Coca-Cola company doesn't like for being too violent. Now, normally, I don't give a f*** about that shit. Algo-speak makes you talk like a baby and I hate it. However, dear viewer, this programme is supposed to inform you of the dangers of online censorship. And as such, this video has been designed as a demonstration of that censorship and its ability to stifle our ability to talk about these sensitive and important subjects. During the presentation, you will hear phrases such as eating grapes, watching prawns, smelling the incense. You, viewer, must understand that these phrases are not as they appear to be. It is our hope that this demonstration shall be just as educational as the presentation itself. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Let me tell you about No Mercy, a game that was released and then quickly removed from Steam a few months ago. I cannot show you any gameplay from No Mercy for reasons that will become obvious very quickly, so we're going to use Minecraft instead. No Mercy's Steam page describes the game as a 3D choice-driven adult visual novel about love and passion. At least, that's what it says now. What it used to say is, No Mercy is a 3D choice-driven adult visual novel with a huge focus on incense and male domination. After your mother's affair shatters your family, you take on a new role, not to fix what's broken, but to claim her for yourself, unveil her deepest secrets, subdue her, and make all women yours. To expand on that a bit more, the mature content section of the page lists the content as incense, blue male, unavoidable non-consensual socks. Warning, this is not your average love story. Really, you don't say. No Mercy sparked quite a controversy back in April. The UK Secretary for Technology, Peter Kyle, good name, issued a statement about the game. Outraged by the game and demanding it be removed from all storefronts as soon as possible, which, at least in the UK, Australia and Canada, it quickly was. An activist group called Collective Shout started to change the org petition to get the game removed, which ended with about 70,000 signatures. In the end, in the face of the controversy, the developers decided to take the game down themselves. So, this seems like a pretty open and shut case, right? I doubt there's very many people who are inclined to defend No Mercy. I personally am pretty disgusted by the content of the game and would quietly block anyone I caught on Steam playing it. It's gross, crass, exploitative, insensitive, and I find myself very easily swayed by the idea that a game like this doesn't belong on Steam. But there's some lessons to be learned from the No Mercy controversy. The power of collective action? Sure. But the most important lesson is the old genie lesson. Be careful what you wish for. Just a few months after the No Mercy drama, Steam implemented a purge of prawn graphic games across its catalogue. About a week after that, itch.io, one of the biggest platforms for indie developers, initiated a similar policy with extremely messy results. In a statement the next day, the creator of itch.io specifically named a campaign by Collective Shout as the reason for the purge. Itch.io's purge is specifically noteworthy because it seems that they removed about 20,000 games from their library with no prior warning to the developers. They're not just blocking the No Mercies, they're blocking pretty much every game with an NSFW or adult label. And they're also denying payouts to the creators of these games. And I know you're probably wondering, why should you care? Why should you care if a bunch of creepy prawn games are being taken off of a platform that you probably don't use anyway? Many reasons. Prawn-graphic games are not the antithesis of art, just like excessive violence and gore and horror still are, even though they're not always tasteful. Our squeamishness about socks is a cultural bias. They can show a gory horror film in the same theatres as Smurfs, but two people forking has to go to the dodgy theatre down the road. I'm not saying that's good or bad, that's just how it is. That's how it's been for as long as I can remember, as evidenced by the fact that I get in trouble if I even say the word. Prawns are something you consume in private and never talk about in polite company. This means that most people consider it a lesser art form than anything else. Prawns have one very specific purpose, if you catch my meaning. But that's not actually true, and itch.io especially was seen as a haven for creatives doing things in that medium that are creative and explorative in ways that mainstream platforms would never allow. And yes, some of them are also about smelling incense with your stepsister. To which I say, try and reserve your judgment. Yeah, people are into what they're into. Roleplay in the bedroom is exceptionally common, and policing the fantasies that people partake in is not a battle you're ever going to win. Is there a discussion to be had about how some of these games portray women? Absolutely there is. Some of these games can get extremely problematic, and I think there is a debate to be had about where yucking someone's yums comes into conflict with calling out genuine misogyny. But we're like 6 levels of cultural acceptance away from having that conversation. And while you may have your ideas of who plays these sorts of games, it's important to point out that prawn game communities are often heavily bolstered by LGBTQ players and creatives who can use the space to explore themes and ideas that mainstream media would immediately reject. This is absolutely the case for itch.io, which leads neatly into the next reason you should care. Policies like this always have the biggest effect on marginalised people. When your existence as a trans person is considered inherently adult and taboo by the culture you live in, then your stuff is going to be marked as adult even if it doesn't have any prawns in it. Your stuff is going to get caught in the crossfire of an anti-prawn crusade. And that's assuming a best case scenario where that isn't an explicit goal, which, well... Let's talk about Collective Shout, shall we? The group that was specifically named and shamed by itch.io as the reason for the change. And indeed they've also claimed Steam as a victory. Collective Shout is a self-described grassroots campaign movement against the objectification and sock liaison of women and girls. On the surface, that sounds like pretty standard feminist affair, right? Unrealistic beauty standards for women, objectification of women in the media, all that stuff, very easy to support as a movement. This is a front. Well, that sounds conspiratorial. It's not a front exactly. They do believe all of that stuff, but their primary focus is anti-prawn. They campaign against other stuff, but one of their primary goals is the abolition of all prawn graphics. It doesn't take much digging at all to see how extreme their views are. This is an excerpt from a submission form they sent to the UN earlier this year. Prawn graphic does not only depict violence against women, it is violence against women and girls. Prawn graphically is violence against women, and those who consume it are more likely to commit violence against women or have an attitude supportive of violence against women. This is the most rad-fem of rad-fem approaches to the prawn industry. They also argue later in that same letter that all pro-institution is eating grape. You know what, fuck this. I tried, but I cannot have this conversation without using the fucking words. They argue that all prostitution is commercialised rape. It's written right here. These words have power, and we need to be able to say them without pussyfooting around the issue for fear of pissing off the algorithm, which now that I've said them will probably happen anyway, but fuck it, the bottle's open now. It's important that we acknowledge these words have power because Collective Shout uses the power of those words as a bludgeon to force themselves into conversations and shout over at anyone who dismisses their ideas. You don't support our movement? Are you pro-rape? All these porn-sick, brain-rotted pedo gamer fetishes so desperate to get their hands on Rape My Little Sister incest games, they're now exchanging clues on how to find them so they don't all die overnight. I bet you thought I was exaggerating. No, they just talk like that all the time. It's a shame and diversion tactic designed to get your opponent to stop talking, because now you're not talking about their arguments, you're defending yourselves from accusations of being a porn-sick, brain-rotted pedo gamer fetishist. Which is a real, the more you struggle, the worse it looks sort of argument to be stuck in. Well, I, and many other feminists, would dispute the idea that prostitution is rape or that all pornography is violence against women. Either of these things can be, but that absolutist approach ignores the agency that sex workers have in their own actions. It's an extremely patronising argument that most sex workers dismiss out of hand. Collective Shout and other anti-porn groups usually combine their anti-porn movement with two others: Protect the Children and Ending Human Trafficking. Both of which are, good. Nobody is pro-child abuse or pro-human trafficking. But these groups will often jump to wild accusations like that Pornhub's entire catalogue is made up of human trafficking, a completely unsubstantiated claim to support their argument that all porn is evil. Is there a lot of issues in the porn industry? Oh yeah, it's the industry we hide shamefully away in the corner. There's a lot of stuff that goes unnoticed in there. Collective Shout is not wrong about everything. There's a lot of abuse and mistreatment that happens in the porn industry. But does that mean that all porn as a concept is inherently misogynistic? No. Need I remind you that it takes two to tango? Or need I remind you that porn caters to a wider audience than straight men? A fact which these groups seem to ignore whenever it's convenient to them. Is yaoi violence against women? Again, assuming that's not intentional, which is a big assumption to make considering that at the same time the founder was tweeting about porn-sick, brain-rotted pedo fetishists or whatever it was, she was also retweeting this gem by no one tariff Megan Murphy. Pervert nerds are responsible for most of society's ills. Prove me wrong. Evidence 1, trans. If this is starting to sound less feminist and more Christian fundamentalist, that's not an accident. Collective Shout isn't that secretive about its partnership with Christian groups like Exodus Cry, who are much more open about their desire to ban all pornography. Also, let's not forget that when we're talking about itch.io, we're not talking about real women, we're talking about illustrations and 3D models. Illustrations and 3D models can hurt people, cultural influence and all that, but when we're talking about illustrations, we're not talking about sex trafficking anymore, are we? They use the exact same tactics with their Save the Children arguments. They argue that a bunch of the games taken off of Steam involve children, even when on the list that they provide, none of them actually include children. Even when Steam was allowing this adult content, they had very strict rules about age, but this is a classic fundamentalist tactic. All porn is equally evil, so if you find one kind of porn, you can just assume that the worst possible kind of porn is also there without actually checking. Because nothing moves a crowd faster than protecting the children. This is what makes No Mercy such a great find for Collective Shout. It's a game of vile subject matter that's very easy to point to as something that shouldn't exist. But when you get right down to it, it's the same argument they've been making about violent video games for the last 40 years now. That GTA will inspire a crime wave of teenagers attempting to steal cars because they saw it in a video game. It's never been true, and it's not true now. And also, just FYI, Collective Shout did campaign against GTA 5 back when it first came out, and they will undoubtedly try the same thing again when GTA 6 comes out. I'm not a fan of Xeric Games, I think the game they made is gross and weird, but in their statement before taking down the game, I think they make a lot of salient points. Rape. Here also. No one wants anyone to get hurt. However, it's strongly connected with blackmail and male domination, which is also a fetish. If someone plays with their partner at home pretending to be a student and teacher who demands sexual acts in exchange for a grade, should we label them as sick and call them rapists, check their computer and lock them in prison? I fully understand that for many people such things may be disgusting, but during sex, people should really do what they want, as long as they don't harm anyone. Even if you find the content of the game gross, even if you would judge someone for playing it, you cannot police someone's thoughts, and you certainly should not police what they do in the bedroom as long as everyone involved is a consenting adult. Just because you find someone's fetish gross does not mean that fetish should be illegal. Now you can argue if Steam is the right platform for that sort of thing, but the game was marked as 18+, requiring a registered account to access. Could kids get past that? I'm sure they could, but they'd have to have heard of the game first. And as the developer letter points out, the game was a complete unknown until Collective Shout shone a spotlight on it. To be completely honest with you, I didn't even know there was porn on Steam until they started removing all, so, how big of a problem was this really? I understand the impulse to side with Collective Shout here. This is gross, this shouldn't exist. I also have that impulse. But you need to fight that impulse, because this is about so much more than just some weird porn. What's more important than the politics of Collective Shout is the method that they use to get these games removed. On the 11th of July, they published an open letter not addressed to Steam and itch, but to payment processors. Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, and a bunch of others. What's the logic there? Well, Collective Shout can certainly shout, but they don't actually have any power over Steam to enforce what they want them to do. There's only two groups that have the power to do that. Governments and payment processors. One of these makes sense. Governments make laws and all that. But the other, that's a little bit weirder. Payment processors are something that you probably don't think about very often if they're doing their job right. They're the companies that facilitate the transactions between businesses and your bank. Pretty much every bank in the world has a deal with either Visa or MasterCard. I'm not going to show you my bank card, but you trust me, it has a little Visa sticker on it, and there's a 50% chance that yours does too. These companies are such a normal part of daily life that we don't really think about them, but every time you swipe your card at the shops or buy something on Amazon, Visa or MasterCard gets a percentage of that money. That's why collectively they're worth about $850 billion. Together, they hold what's called a duopoly over payment processing, which gives them an insane amount of power. This most commonly causes friction with companies like Amazon and Walmart. Because these companies are relying on payment processing for their business, Visa and MasterCard can charge them higher than they really need to because there's nothing that they can really do about it. If Amazon refuses to keep paying the fees, then Amazon loses half its revenue overnight. That's already a scary amount of power, but the last 5 years or so have seen an increase in these companies using that power to exert influence and control over what other companies produce, with a particular crackdown on pornography. In 2020, they both withdrew support for Pornhub after a scandal, only agreeing to come back after the site completely gutted its catalogue with an extremely rigorous verification system that ended with about half of the videos on the site being removed. In 2021, they tried to force OnlyFans to ban adult content in a move that everyone agreed was incredibly stupid. In 2023, the AI chatbot thing, Replica, was forced to shut down NSFW roleplay because of pressure from payment processors. In 2024, the Japanese company Manga Library Z was forced to shut down after Visa and MasterCard took issue with its adult content, and so on and so forth. If you want a much greater breakdown of the specifics of these stories, then I recommend this video by Lextorius, which came out as I was making this one. I love it when that happens. No, it's fine. It's okay. It's a good video. It's fine. The point is, these recent bans on Steam and itch are not a new thing. They're the most recent in a pattern of behaviour by these payment processors. Collective Shout may have signal boosted these things, but it's Visa and MasterCard who pulled the trigger. To quote Rebecca S. Franco's paper on the subject, MasterCard and Visa can dictate and set the rules for platforms on the type of content that can be hosted and streamed, and on what terms. These rules and standards make duopolistic credit card networks private, top-down regulators of the adult industry, for which processors have become mediators and enforcers. As industry lawyer Joshua puts it, Visa and MasterCard have the power. They control the keys to the golden city. Adult platforms are dependent on payment intermediaries for vital financial infrastructure, and thus have to comply with these rules. Now call me a Stalinist or whatever, but I don't think a private company should have that kind of unilateral control over the moderation of other companies, oftentimes in entirely different countries. Separate this from porn for a minute. Visa and MasterCard are able to shut down any company they want at any time, for any reason, without any warning or explanation. That's fucking bonkers, right? To quote Japanese game director and real-life cartoon character Yoko Taro, it's not just about adult content regulations or freedom of expression. It feels like there's a security hole affecting democracy as a whole. Correct. One absolutely terrifying system we found ourselves in, where two private companies can just fucking Thanos snap the livelihoods of thousands of people whenever they want. And that vagueness is now built into the moderation standards of both Steam and itch. Both of them adding content that may violate the rules and regulations of our payment processors into their list of prohibited uploads. What does that mean? Well, it means whatever the hell MasterCard wants it to mean, giving them complete authority to remove any game from Steam that they want for whatever reason they choose. This is about so much more than some dodgy porn games. The floodgates are open. Visa and MasterCard have just exerted control over the games that we're allowed to make and the games we're allowed to play. And who's to say they stop at porn? Just a few days ago, YouTube announced a new experimental feature. They're going to be using AI to guess the age of users. If the AI guesses that an account is under 18, it will automatically put that account into kids mode, requiring photo ID proof verification to unlock again. This comes just a few days after the UK implemented online safety laws that require every single website that has the potential of adult content to require photo ID proof of age. The results of that law have been as messy as you'd expect because adult is such a deliberately vague category. So these laws are being used to age-gate. For example, news about Palestine, trans subreddits, forums for dealing with sexual harassment and sexual abuse. None of these things are porn, but all of these things are things that a teenager should probably have access to, in my opinion. Even if you are an adult, you now have to give your photo ID to Elon Musk? No thanks. I started this video trying to capitulate to that stuff because, hey, I would actually quite like this video to do well. But it's absolutely impossible to have a serious discussion about this stuff when you can't use the words. Because the stupid robot can't tell the difference between endorsing sexual assault and talking about sexual assault. All of these precautions to prevent a teenager from seeing some tits. Who gives a shit? If a teenager wants to look at porn, they're gonna find a way to look at porn and there's nothing you can do to stop them. Hell hath no fury like a teenage boy on the hunt for tits. So now we all get to suffer under laws that do not prevent the one thing they're designed to prevent. The age of consent in the UK is 16, so you're allowed to have sex at 16, but you're not allowed to watch sex until you're 18. It's absolutely ridiculous. Sexual content is always the first line of attack for censorship, because it's the easiest one to target, because it's embarrassing to come out swinging for porn. Well, lucky enough for you, I'm immune to embarrassment, and also I know a little bit about history. A few videos ago I talked about the Commons Code Authority of the 50s and 60s, and how its censorship of violence and sexual issues was actually used as a cover for censorship of racial issues and other civil rights issues. Movies went through a similar thing with the Hays Code of the 30s and 40s. The pattern continues now, a bunch of rich conservative bastards trying to tell us what we're allowed to enjoy. Fuck that. It can be hard to know what to do about all of this. There are some numbers that people suggest you can call, but the main thing to do is just to make your voice heard. Don't just sit there passively and take this stuff. Don't just surrender. Kick up a fuss. If we can learn anything from collective shit, it's that being really obnoxious and shouting really loud does actually work sometimes. So, fuck it. Civility's out of fashion. Be gay. Do crimes. Peace out. Thank you for watching, and a very special thank you to my wonderful patrons for your continued support. If you'd like to see your name up here or just support the things that I do, then please consider signing up. It would mean a lot to me. As well as a like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring the bell, because I'm an alarmist. If you like this video, you'll probably enjoy this video about Star Trek, where I talk about the comics code like I mentioned 2 minutes ago. Or for something a bit different, here's a 6-hour video about Borderlands, because why wouldn't you want that? Okay, peace out for real, bye!